welcome to the How to Learn Anything course from Plato University, where you're going to learn the science-based tools of pro learners to accelerate your learning, remember more, and master any hard skills. These are the secret techniques they didn't tell you in school. If you're passionate about changing your life with learning, join us at plato.university to get exclusive content with every lesson. I'm your learning guide, Brandon Stover, and let's get started. All right, now we're on to technique number 8, which is elaboration. And this is another technique that's going to help you commit things to long-term memory. Now, when you're committing things to long-term memory, you can broaden your set of links by actively thinking about what you're learning, as well as by writing it and talking about it. And the technique of self-explaining or elaboration can help with this. With this technique, you actively trying to explain in your own words what you're learning. It involves explaining and describing ideas with many details. Elaboration also involves making connections among ideas you are trying to learn and connecting the material to your own experiences, memories, and day-to-day life. Now, a specific method of elaboration is called Elaborative Interrogation. Interrogation means to question. So in this process, you're asking yourself questions about how and why things work, and then produce the answers to these questions. The specific questions that you ask will depend in part on the topics you're studying. So for example, how does X work? Why does X happen? Why did X happen? What caused X? What is the result of X? And so on. So what's an example of this? Well, imagine that you're studying calculus and the topic is derivatives. You can start asking yourself, how do derivatives work? And then answer that. Well, they are the rate of change. Well, how does that work? Well, you take a look at one point, then you take a look at a prior point over some interval, and then you take the difference divided by the interval. As that interval approaches 0, you have the instantaneous rate of change. And why does this happen? Because instantaneous means that the interval is nothing. Now, this is a really complicated example of calculus, but you can see how I led myself through different questions and started to elaborate by answering that question. During this process of making explanations of what you've learned, you're trying to simplify, improve, and provide examples of the idea or concept. Now, what's the science behind elaboration and why it works so well? Well, elaboration invokes deep processing of the material by forming new associations and can also involve chunking and deliberate practice, depending on the specific nature of the task. Elaboration works in part because it induces the generation effect, which is enhanced memory that results from retrieving or organizing information from long-term memory. You often induce this effect when you've learned something and you try and teach it to another person, because the process of teaching it or explaining it to another person requires you to process the information very deeply, organize it, and think about the associations you want to tap into and the new associations you want to create when teaching the other person. But you don't necessarily need to be actually teaching somebody else. You could just be explaining the steps that you're going through, say when you're solving a problem or recalling information. For example, let's say you're working on a numerical problem. Stop at every step and ask the question, why am I doing this step? And then try to come up with an explanation to that answer. In one experiment, students who explained their steps when solving logical reasoning questions scored 90% better on a later test. Students who didn't self-explain their steps scored only 23%. Well, what's really in it for you when you're using the elaborative technique? Asking yourself a number of why and how questions will encourage you to produce explanations for the ideas you're learning, and to really integrate the new material you are learning with the things you already know or have experienced in the past. And by integrating these new ideas with what you've already learned, helps you to organize the new ideas, making them easier to bring to mind later on, such as when you need to apply these concepts in real life. And by using the elaborative interrogation technique, it encourages you to think about relationships between different ideas and understanding how two ideas are both similar to one another and how they are different from one another, improving your understanding of the overall material. Now, at Plato University, we sometimes have you use the elaborative technique. Our courses are laid out in a manner that connects each chunk of a skill with the previous lessons. As you learn them, you begin making connections between those lessons to build up your overall proficiency of the skill. Along the way, during particular active recall exercises, we may ask you to elaborate on a topic, showing your understanding of these various connections. Now, how do you start using the elaborative technique? Well, when you're approaching learning something, look at the different subjects, concepts, or ideas that are coming from the thing that you're learning. Begin asking yourself questions about how these ideas work and why. And when you ask these questions, try to actively recall, without looking at your learning material or your notes, the answers to some of those questions, putting the answers in your own words and using your own elaborative details. As you continue to elaborate on the ideas you are learning, make connections between multiple ideas to be learned and explain how they work together. A good way to do this is take two ideas and think about ways that they are similar and ways that they are different. And then take this even one step further by describing how the ideas you are studying apply to your own life experiences or memories. In addition, as you go through your day, take notice of the things happening around you and make connections to the ideas you're learning about. Doing this makes you go through the practice of active recall throughout the day and gives you spaced repetition of your material, which we'll cover in the next technique. Our activity is to try and explain and describe the idea of elaboration with as many details as possible to somebody else. Why use elaboration? How does it work? Answer those questions and create an explanation without looking over your notes or going back and listening to this lesson. Once you've created an explanation for yourself, then go ahead and check your notes. How accurate was it? If it was a little inaccurate, then maybe you need to revisit the material or look for another source about elaboration. And we'll put some links down below. Maybe look through some of the studies so you can get a better concept and understanding of it. Thank you for taking the How to Learn Anything course. To get everything you need to become a pro learner, including advanced resources, personal coaching, and a community of passionate learners just like you, then visit plato.university/courses/learning and join us for free. Again, that's plato.university/courses/learning. This course was produced by Plato University, where students turn passions into purpose and learn skills to change the world. Learn more at plato.university.